Hello, my name is John Corser, and welcome to the Eclipse Advanced Training for Commissioning of Care. Today I'm going to be talking you through how commissioning of care forms work in Eclipse and some of the little basics about how Eclipse works. This is the login screen for Eclipse. So the first thing I'm going to do today is log in. And as I've logged in, it's took me to my homepage. You can tell I'm on the homepage because we've got this blue circle with a little white house in it, indicating you're on the homepage. Next to that is my name and my PER number. So my PER number is my unique Eclipse number. Everyone will have their own unique Eclipse number. It'll be different to your Care First number. And every person and client will have one that starts PER for person. If you're looking at a team or a provider, it will say ORG for organisation. And again, the team and the provider codes will be different in Care First to what they are in Eclipse. So I'm on my home screen. On the left hand side we can see there's a menu. There's only 3 options at the moment: home, e-records and share care records. When I'm looking at a client, there'll be more options there. It works very similar to how the Care First menu buttons work. At the top of the screen, this line here, or this row, stays here the whole time. So if I was flicking through different tabs on the left, it would still be here at the top. It's got a person search bar here. We'll look at the search bar a little bit later, but that search feature stays at the top the whole time, as I said. There's the recently accessed records button. Click on that. I've got 2 people that I've looked at recently. Similar to on Care First, we had a recently accessed records button, but in Eclipse, I believe it goes up to 200. And then after you've looked at 200 people, they start to drop off at the end. But obviously, that is considerably quite a lot compared to Care First. We've got our change team button. So on Care First, you'd have to, it's a little bit fiddly to change your team. Whereas in Eclipse, it's a lot easier. I can just click here and change from one team to another. I'll show you that in a couple of seconds. We've got a name here and a button. And this is where I can go to change my passwords or my notification settings. So I'll just quickly show you notification settings. So if you're getting sent a piece of work, you'll receive a notification, but you can set up how you want to receive that notification. So the SMS is there, but I don't believe that feature will be enabled. You can have it on email, through Eclipse, in your cases and Teams cases, and through notable events. So obviously, depending on how you work, email, you may use that if you're going on leave and you want to look at your notifications in your email box when you get back. It's entirely up to you. There's no default setting on this. So you'll get to pick how you want your notifications set up. Works very similar to anyone that uses social media and has notifications. I'm going to cancel that. There's a blue Learn How To button, similar to like if you're using Word or Excel or anything else that's got a help feature. You can just go in here, type in what you want help with and search, and it will give you a little help. There's a log out button, which is obviously quite straightforward. You can just use it to log out. We've got an authorization tab. So if you was a manager, you'd receive work to be authorized in there. Work list, which is what we're on at the moment, and allocation. So allocation will take you on to anything that is allocated to you, any cases. But before I click on that, I'll just show you here. We've got this lovely little table, which is showing an overview of the work I've got allocated to me. We can see it's got all the different teams I'm listed against, what's overdue, reminders, on time, paused, things with errors, and how many clients I've got allocated to me. If I go to my tasks, I can see that I can, depending on what team I'm on at the top, I can see I'm on business support. So I've got a 1, a 3, and a 2. So if I go on my tasks, that kind of work is listed there. But if I wanted to look at my AMP work, I'd have to change my team at the top. Then go to my tasks, and we can see the work that's allocated to me for my AMP team. I'm just going to change it back to business support for now. And I can look at my stuff in my team. And because I've changed to a manager profile, I've also now got another tab which looks at my colleagues' tasks. So as a manager, you'd be able to look at what's allocated to people in your team. Obviously helpful if the person's on leave or off sick. and you can look at their work and allocate it somewhere else. So the other button that I mentioned is the allocation button. I'm just going to click on that. So if you was a social worker here, it would show what cases are allocated to you here. Because I'm on the manager profile, I can look at these other tabs. Don't really need to go into that. But what's that's done, because I'm in my allocation, it's gave me the button to add a person. Now there's two places you can add a client in Eclipse. One is when you're on your allocation tab, and the other is when you're on the person specification page of a client. I'm just going to add a person. So the first thing I'm going to do today is to add a person. Because we're in a training system, we need to add a dummy person so that I can do work on them. Throughout Eclipse, you'll see questions that have a star next to them. That means they're a mandatory question, and ones with no stars are not mandatory. So to go through a form, you won't be able to go onto the next page or tab or complete a form unless you've done the mandatory questions. So if I don't actually answer any of these and I try to go next, it brings up an error. It says, sorry, there's a problem with the form, and it's telling me what I haven't answered. It's put red boxes around them, only for the mandatory ones. We can see ethnicities, and on this screen it's a bit further down, but you can see these are like hyperlinks. So if I click on ethnicity, it takes me straight to it. So they are quite helpful tools to make sure that you're completing the form correctly. So I'm just going to create a dummy person. Age, purpose. And you can see date of birth is mandatory question. It's got a little I next to it. So if I hover over that, that's an information. And in some parts, areas of Eclipse will give you these little information guides. You can hover over and it just tells you. You can say here, it says you can enter full or partial dates or an age, or update the other fields for you. So what that means is I can leave it as just the year 2000, and it's giving me the age 21. I don't have to put a month and day in. So that's helpful if you don't know the person's date of birth. You could put that in, and then later on you could put the correct date of birth. But we also have this feature because if you're adding carers, GPs, etc., you might not know their date of birth. So because it's a mandatory question, you are having to put something in there, and you wouldn't really want to need to know off GP what their exact date of birth is, so you could put estimates. But I'm going to give the person a proper date of birth. I'm just going to say it was born on the 19th of January. Again, it's a mandatory question here, but we can go unknown for gender. So if you wasn't sure, you could put unknown and then answer it later. Just going to put the person's male because I know that. Ethnicity, again, is a mandatory question, but we can go not known and then answer it later if we need to be. But I'm going to answer it. The guy is actually Argentinian, but there's no Argentinian option, so I'm going to go this Welsh. Underneath, we've got the option to add an NHS number. It's not mandatory, so I'm not going to do that. And the CHI number, which is the Scottish equivalent of an NHS number. So it's not likely you'll see many of those here. It's not mandatory, so I'm going to go next. Now, this next screen is whenever you've added someone to the system, you've got the option to add a relationship from yourself to that person. So if I was this client's social worker, I could mark that I was the social worker here. If I was adding the person on behalf of another social worker, I could change this here to that social worker and then mark that it's the social worker. But because we're only really looking at commissioning of care forms and we're not doing a full client overview today, I'm just going to skip the creation of this professional relationship. Most of the time when people are added to the system, this would be what would be selected because they'd be added by the contact center. I'm just going to go save. And then what that will do, just give it a few seconds. It will take you to the person screen. Gets there, the person identification screen. And we can see we're no longer on the home screen because the blue circle with the house has now changed to a blue circle with a person in it. Where it had my name before, it's now got the client's name and their unique PER number. So if I just scroll down a bit, this looks very similar to, well, it doesn't look similar because we've got a big picture here, but it's got similar questions to what you'd expect to see on Care First for the person details screen. This big option here, the big grey box and the person in it, that is the option to add a photograph of the client. In adults, we won't be using that feature, but it will stay there because people in children's use Eclipse and they will use that feature. So the longer we use Eclipse, we'll see some clients come through from children's and transitions that will have a picture of the client. So if I wanted to edit any of that information I've just done, there's a blue edit button here that I can click on. And that allows me to change the name that I've just added or the date of birth. So like I was saying earlier, if you was unsure if something was correct or you didn't know the full details, you could enter it and then come back and change it. We've got the option to add a display name and other names. So if the person was called Jonathan, but he likes to be called John, we could put that in here. We've got other questions that we didn't have when we was adding a client, like gender identity, sexual orientation, country of birth and religion. We've also got the option to add a citizenship, but I'm not going to go into those because they're quite straightforward. You just click on the drop down menu and select, and they're not necessary for today's training exercise. So I'm just going to cancel that. And I scroll down, and then we've got 6 tabs. Similar to what you see on Care First, there's tabs for adding certain things. So I'm just going to go through and add some of these. The first one I'm going to look at is addresses. So I can just click on either the down arrow or where it says addresses or this blue down arrow on the right. There's plenty of ways to work around Eclipse. And it's opened up the addresses tab, and it's now gave us a blue button to add address. So I'm just going to add an address. Now the first box is in a bit of a weird place. It's if the location was not known. So if the person was homeless or no fixed abode, you'd be using that feature, that drop down menu. If you put something in there and you've done it on accident, you can't take it out, unfortunately, so you'd have to cancel and then go back in. I'm not sure what it's at the top, it should be last. So I'm just going to go through and add an address. And you can see, because I've typed the postcode in, it's brought down a drop down list of addresses at that postcode. If I don't know the full address, and then I put the number in here, it gives me all of the addresses that match that remit in a drop down list. Just going to select one of those. So a really good thing on Eclipse compared to Care First addresses, it gets the addresses from the the postal database. So all addresses nationwide should be available in this list. Anything, so we can look at ones from Leeds, Manchester, London. You should be able to add them. Obviously in Care First, if we was doing addresses outside Birmingham, someone would have to add them manually. The other good thing about this is if 93 Hengham Road was a flat and you should be picking 93A or B, Eclipse will make you pick from 93A or B. Whereas in Care First, we wasn't always doing that. People was entering the addresses manually, which would end up obviously with data quality errors. We could potentially have people going to visit the clients at the wrong addresses and send out correspondence to the wrong addresses. The only kind of times you would have to add an address is manually, is if it was a new build and the admin added to the postal database, but that is unlikely, because imagine by the time the new build is built and the postal database would likely be updated before it gets to us as a client or carer. And the other time is if the person lives overseas. So if we was looking at some kind of financial representative or relative, there is the possibility to live overseas, and that address would have to be added manually. It's a lot better our addresses on Eclipse compared to Care First. So I'm just going to continue with adding the address. I'm just going to go type, give it a home address, permanent, room and flora to do if it was in a flat. And we can see there's a date option here. We could type it in, or we could use the calendar. I'm just going to use this blue select current date button. Now there's the option for do not disclose. I'm going to select that just so you can see what it is. But obviously if the person didn't want anyone to know what their address was, you'd be selecting that option. So put slave. We can see it's added the address. It's got this little red no entry kind of circle sign next to it. And if I hover over that, it says do not disclose. It's added the address just under the person's name at the top. And again, it's got that. So if you was looking at the client for the first time, you'd know not to disclose their address. I'm just going to close that. And I'm going to go to do the next one, which is contact details. I'm going to go add. I'm just going to give the person a basic home telephone number. Just going to give them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's the option to put verified. So if the number had been verified to be incorrect, you'd select that. I'm not going to do that for now. And it's added the telephone number. Good thing here is you can see it's quite clear. It's easy to look at. We've got grey boxes around each different thing. So in Care First, it was a bit jumbled. You'd be having to look at them probably in more detail because you wouldn't be sure which one was mobile numbers and which one was telephone numbers. Here we can clearly see what the phone number is, what the mobile number is, what the email address is if they've added it. We've also got one for fax, social media and websites. Not necessarily likely to be used by clients, but in the future, potentially more of these features might get used. So I'm just gonna, there was one thing I forgot to say is if in Care First you could add please call brother, so you could add text and not just numbers. You can't do that in Eclipse. So if I just try to show you. You can see it's saying it must match and only have numbers. The reason for this is because for data quality, it should only be numbers. But if you need to add one where it's the person doesn't like to be called and they prefer their son or mother or whoever it is to be called instead, you add that as an alert, which I will show you briefly. I'm just going to close that one and go on to the next one is reference numbers. So on Care First, you used to have reference numbers for if they had any records, if they've got a national insurance number, a passport. You'd see the same reference numbers in here. The only difference is now you'd see the person's Care First number if you was using Eclipse, and if you was using Care First, you'd see the person's Eclipse number, which is quite handy when we come to the search feature in a bit. But I'm not going to add any reference numbers, they're quite straightforward. Languages, I'm going to add a language. Now, throughout Eclipse, it's always, a lot of things are drop-down lists. So if I start typing in English, see it's come down with the drop-down lists for English, and you have to select one of those. If you don't, and you just type it in, and try to save, it's saying you haven't completed it. Because obviously it's like a code in the background, and on Care First, you'd have to use a certain code for certain languages. You're not having to type in the codes here. You can just start typing it in and select from the drop-down list. So it's just something to get used to in Eclipse. It's really handy. It's a lot better than how it works in Care First. I'll probably mention that again a bit later. So there's the option to add proficiency in English. So if I'd selected the person's first language as French, this would be a mandatory question. I'm just going to put the person as proficient. There's the option to add another language. I'm not going to do that today. There's the option for interpreter required. So if I'd put a different language to English, this would be available as a tick box. And then there's loads of non-verbal communication skills. So obviously there's quite a few options here, which would be handy for selection for certain clients. I'm just going to save that. And we can see very similar to the contact details one. It's quite easy to look at. It's nice. You know, you can look at it quite quickly, and the overview is helpful and easy on the eye compared to Care First. Obviously, first languages used to be in the classifications, but now it's gone onto the person screen. Probably a better place for it to be. So that's that for languages. Next one is education. We're not going to look at that because that's related to children's. And the last one is physical items. So if the person had a hard file somewhere in Iron Mountain, it'd be listed in there, as well as various other things. It'd be used the same way as how Care First is used. So I'm just going to scroll to the top, and we can see the telephone number's also been added here and there. So I'm just going to show you an alert. So if I click on alerts, and I'm going to go to, you can see there's different types of alerts. So there's a lot of children's ones in the middle. There's ones for access to property, adult is missing, and there's two different ones for communications. So I'm just going to go contact preferences, and I'm just going to put ones for please call son. Obviously, if you're someone that needing to add these, you know more so what needs to be typed. I'm just going to give a date, and we can add this. And you can see it's added that alert right next to the person's name. It's an orange circle with a 1 and an apostrophe next to it. If I hover over it, it tells me what it is. So if I come onto the client for the first time, it's quite stand out. I'm just going to add a warning as well. Works very similar. I'm just going to say start date. And you can see that's added a warning right next to it. You can see it's in red. It's got a triangle. It's a bit more of a dangerous looking colour, so it's obviously stand out more. And you can hover over it again. Warnings works the same way as the doing care first, so only a manager can add them. But I think in Eclipse, anyone can look at them. So because I'm on the manager profile, I've got to add it. But if I just change to my non-manager profile, just so you can see how it works. You can see I can still see these, but if I try to edit the warning, it won't let me edit it because I'm not a manager. So the other things that on the person's screen that happens is you can see that the telephone number and the address are here. So if I click on the address, it's a hyperlink and it takes me straight to Google Maps. Sometimes you get a little picture of the address. And obviously, if you've used Google Maps before, you know how it works. So I can use this to plan my directions to get there. If I was using a work mobile phone and I had Eclipse on it, I'd be able to use that to get sat-nav directions. And the telephone number works the same way. So if I was using a work mobile phone, I'll click on that and it'll take me straight to the dial screen to dial the number. There was one other button I forgot to show you, is a templates button. So if you're someone that creates templates off Care First, you'd be using this button to create templates off Eclipse. It hasn't got many on here at the moment because I believe it's the training system. I'd imagine more will be added later. So you just create a template, just quickly show you that. And you generate it. And then what that will do is it will move it into the Documents tab for you. And we can just click on this blue select button and download document. And that will download it to your computer so you can edit it and print it out or email it to the client or whoever you need to email it to. So I'm just going to remove that because you don't really want that on there. Let's go back to my person screen. And the other things to do with the person screen, which I'll show you later as well once we've done a bit more work on the client. If I click on the person's name, it brings up a person summary. There's not much information there because I've only just created it. There'd be the picture there if it was someone that we could add a picture to. We can see key relationships. We can see the latest events, classifications, an overview, and a chronology timeline. There's also a finance summary screen. This doesn't work in the training system, but it should work in Go Live. So you'll get information from Care First finance screens, the key details, financial representative, budget, personal budget, the charging, and the services and payments. I'll look at these again towards the end of the session when we've done a little bit of work on the client. Now to look at the search feature. As I mentioned earlier, this bar stays at the top all the time. So if I change to a different tab, you can see it's still there. Let's go on another one. So it's quite handy in Care First. The search button wasn't always at the top. You'd have to go back to the desktop and you could use the change button. I think it's change. But here it just stays at the top, so you can just search whatever screen you're on. There's the options to search for person, group, or organisation. So group relates to children's, organisation relates to teams and providers. And then we've got person. So it's on default for person to search for clients and staff members as well. And if I start typing in, it brings up people with John as the first name, John as the surname, and people with names that sound like John. It's also got people with other full names as John, because I was thinking, why is that test there? It's because it's got four full names John. You obviously don't list many because the screen's not massive. But if I want to look at all the options, I can go and show all and list all the results. Now there's only 51. You'd expect to see a lot more Johns in the live system. Because we're only in the training system, there isn't many clients added. If it brought back too many results from what I've searched, I can go and show criteria here on the top right. It brings up an advanced search option. I'm going to talk through this in a second, but I'm not going to show you how it works here. But obviously, if you wanted to search for extra things because you haven't got quite the result you wanted to, you'd use that button. But there's another way to get there. So if I just take out the name and click on this blue advanced button here, it brings up the advanced search. So here there's the options to search for their gender, their name, their date of birth. we have got an option to search for ages between. So if we was unsure if the person was 25 or 26, you could search from the ages 24 to 27. It'd list everything in between the age group. We've got the option to search for NHS numbers, the addresses, which is quite straightforward, and the postcode. We've got another box here for reference numbers. So if you didn't know the person's Eclipse number, but you knew their Care First number, you could put that in there and it would find the person. If the person had their passport number added to Eclipse or their national insurance, you could put that in here and search for it. Now you wouldn't type passport and then the number. You'd literally just type the number in. I don't know any passport numbers, and search. And if it's been added, it would find it. Now, a good thing about Eclipse and its data quality perspective, it only lets one person have the reference number. So in Care First, I've seen it where different people have the same passport number, or different people have the same national insurance number. Obviously, that shouldn't be the case because a passport number is unique to one person. So if I'd added a passport number to my person today and I tried to add the same passport number to someone tomorrow, it wouldn't allow that. So what that means is, obviously, when I'm searching, it will only bring back the results for the person that has that passport number. Whereas in Care First, if we could search on that, it'd bring back multiple clients that shouldn't have that passport number because they've been added incorrectly. So it's a really good search feature. It's quite clever. Sometimes it's a little bit too clever for its own good. But once you're using it, you get used to it. It is really good. Next thing I'm going to look at is case notes. So case notes is the replacement for observations in Care First. Work very similar, slightly better. So we've got these blue buttons up here. Whenever you're trying to do something, it's normally a blue button on the right-hand side of the screen. So I'm just going to add a case note. We've got the option to add the date and the time, but we have got these two blue buttons underneath for select just current date or select current date and time. That's what I'm going to be using today. Pretty much everything I do is going to be today's date. But obviously, if you was doing something, you was doing a backdated case note because you'd done something yesterday but forgot to put the case note on, you could use the calendar to put yesterday's date, or you could manually type yesterday's date in. We've got entry type and entry subtype. So when I click on entry type, there's a lot over here at the top for children's, which won't, because it's a training system, they show, but they won't be showing when we go live. If I scroll down, however, there's loads of the ones that we'd expect to see in adults. So these should be very similar to what you'd expect to see as your options in Care First observations. I'm just going to, for this one, I'm just going to case summary. Depending on what you've picked on the left, you do have the option on the right to pick a subtype. Some options from the left do not have a subtype, but some do. And we can see, because I've gone case summary, there's a few different options here, but I'm just going to keep it basic and go case summary, case summary. Then we've got a big box for entry. This is where you put the actual case note in, or your observation as you used to calling it. I'm just going to type something in. In a training system, you can just type in whatever you like, it doesn't matter. A good thing about case notes on Eclipse compared to observations in Care First, there's no limit on how many characters you can type. So I think it's either 2,000 or 4,000 on Care First. In Eclipse, it's unlimited. So if you're someone that types really long observations, depending on what you do, you can obviously type to your heart's content. There's the option here to change the font. We can make it slanted, underline it, make it bold. Change the font to type. We can embed an image. I'm not going to do any of that today because that's not something we really need to play around with. But if you want to, you can, if you're following along. Underneath, we've got the source options. So these are similar to on Care First. You put in where that information has come from. Unfortunately, because we're in the training system, they're not working, but they will work and go live. And we've got some buttons at the bottom. Colourful buttons. The first one at the end is the cancel. So obviously, if you've done something totally wrong and you didn't like it, you can cancel it. It gets rid of it all completely. And then we've got complete and save next to it. Work the same way as observations do in Care First. You can complete one, which means then you can't come back and edit it, or you can save it, go away, then come back and continue editing it. Obviously, works the same way as Care First. You'd know if you need to save or complete, depending on what you're doing. And then we've got another button that is to upload. So this is the replacement of uploading files to eRecords. We will now be uploading them to Eclipse. So we will still use eRecords for historical files, but once we are live on Eclipse, anything new documents that need to be uploaded should be uploaded to Eclipse. So they can either be uploaded to the person's case note or to their forms. I will show you how it works with the forms later, but now we're just going to look at the case notes. So I'm just going to quickly show you how this works. I can just click the upload button. It brings up another screen where I can click choose file. And it brings up a search feature to look for the file you want to add. It works exactly the same as if you was attaching a file to an email. If you've ever done that, imagine majority of people have. You've got all the folders on the left for you to search through. You've got a little search feature up here. Because I'm on my desktop, I'm just going to use one that I normally upload, just as a test for training. And then you have to give it a title. And a description. The better naming you have of the file, the easier it will be for people to find later. So just bear that in mind. There's the source features here again, but again, they're not working in the training system, but should be working in live, exactly the same as how it was on the other screen. I'm just going to click upload. And you can see that's attached it to the case note. And if I just click on here, so if I was looking at this case note, it starts to download it, open file, and you can see how quick it is. So that's how it's a lot quicker than eRecords. It's not lagging around, it does it really quick. So I'm just going to complete this one. Yes. And that has been completed. We can see what the entry type is there. We can see the date, which is like a hyperlink to open the case note. We can see there's one file attached here. We can see a paperclip. Now, if I wanted to just look at the file, I could click on this and it opens it up. There's also an option here for view this entry, upload file to this entry and send notification. Now, even though I said as if it's completed, you can't edit it. So if I go in, you can see I can't edit the file, the case note, sorry, but I can upload more files. See, that's added on one. I can also upload a file here this way. So even though the case note is completed and you can't edit the actual message in the case note, you can continue to add files. You should be able to add as many files as you want. I believe, I don't remember recalling that there's a limit. So you can see there's a file there. There's another way to see what files are attached to a client. If we go in the documents tab that we briefly looked at earlier, you can see there's one here for case notes attachments and form attachments. So if I open up the case note attachments, I can see there's those three files that I've attached. I can look at them for here by downloading them. I can also, if I'm looking at just their documents, I can filter on here and search by name or date. There's another filter for purely for case notes attachments. I'm just going to go back to case notes. I'll touch on that briefly later. So what I'm going to do now, just to fill up this person a little bit, I'm just going to quickly add a few more case notes, just so we can see what it looks like when the person's a bit busier. Because we're only in the training system, obviously we can only see brand new things that we've added. But if you was looking at someone in Go Live, you'd expect to see quite a few case notes. A good thing is when you're comparing Care First observations to Eclipse case notes. In Care First observations, when you're going through someone that's got hundreds and hundreds of observations, it's very laggy and takes a long time to change from page to page. But when you're looking at them in Eclipse, it seems to move through a lot smoother. I looked at someone what had 300 the other day, and it was a lot easier to change from page to page. So I'm just going to quickly add some different, I'm going to select different things just so we can see how they look. Okay, I've added a few different ones. And as you can see, I know it's all just random jargon where I smash the keyboard. It doesn't matter because we're in a training system. This is the default view setting for case notes. And we've got the entry date and then a big line here for entry and a person scene and a files. The person scene relates to the notification feature, which we're not showing people at the moment because we don't think it works properly, but we're hoping it gets fixed. So obviously it has a long line for entry because that would be what the majority of the case note is. That's what you'd expect to see more of. I know it's only a training system, so I haven't really entered much there. But if I just quickly just do another one, just so you can see what it looks like if there's one with loads of stuff. Yeah, so obviously the longer it is so you can see more of it, so you don't have to go into the case note to read it. You'd hopefully be able to read it and have an overview of what that case note says. But there is another view setting. So if I click on this view button, now it's changed. You can see it's changed it. We can still got the entry date and the entry, which has kind of shrunk and crushed a little bit. We can see now the different entry types. We can see the sources. Unfortunately, we can't see any because, as I said, that doesn't work in the training system. We can see who the practitioner is. Now, that is the practitioner stands for the person that has added the case note. Unfortunately, obviously, we can't see anyone else's name because I've added them all. We can see the status. So once with the piece of paper and the orange circle and the tick are completed, you can see I can hover over and it tells me. Once with just the piece of paper without the orange circle are ones that have been saved, and you can see it says draft. We can still see person seen and files. We've also got a filter feature. We can see there's plenty of options to search for different dates. So we've got entry date, so that would be the date you actually added within the case note. There's a recorded date from, so that would be the date someone started the case note, and last edited date would be the date someone last worked on it. Lots of dates, different for search features. There's some quick search features for last 7, last 30, and last year. We can go on people, and this will show the different people that have added case notes and the sources, which unfortunately isn't working in the training system. So obviously, if I wanted to look at work being done by a certain person, I could click on their name and it just show theirs. And there's another tab here, type and other. And this is obviously dependent on the entry types people have selected. That will be the ones we looked at. So if I wanted to just look at safeguardings or budget information ones, I could select one of those and I could just look at those ones. There's one for group, which is related to children's, so we wouldn't be using that. And then there's one for attachments. So if you wanted to just look at attachments in case notes, you could use this instead of going in the documents tab. You can search for files with attachments. Obviously, if you was looking at specifically wanted to search for ones with attachments, you'd be selecting that. You can go by their sources, attachment names, and various different feature options. Another thing that you can go on is when you're on this people one, if you wanted to look at ones that had just come from Care First observations, there'd be a Care First option here for you to select. Maybe something you need to use, I'm not sure. So I'm just going to get that filter off. There's the option to create a document and print. So just like that PDF that we saw from the personal identification screen, we could make a document with just their case notes if we needed to. See that? I'm not going to do that today because it's not something people will be doing in commissioning of care forms work. Another thing I forgot to briefly show you is relationships. Now, even though we didn't add a relationship, I'll just show you how this tab. So you could go here to see what social workers are allocated to the person. If the person's got any kind of family relationships or other types of relationships, GPs, and there's a tab here for organisations, so you can see what teams are allocated to the person or their provider information. There is an option to go on a graph. This person won't have any of that. You can look at that if you want to, but I'm not going to show you that because we're looking at commissioning of care today. So the next thing I'm going to go at is the work lists and forms. So forms are the replacements for assessments in Care First. But to add a form, you must add a work list. You can't add a form within forms. You must add a work list. Now, work lists are the step-by-step tasks of how to complete a process. The majority of the times they just relate to forms. So if most of them will have 2 or 3 tasks. It will be add form, complete form, get form authorized. But there is other ones that will include other tasks like send letters out, or depending on the work you're doing. Within commission of care, you'd just be expecting to see 2 or 3 tasks. So I'm just going to add the work lists that we're going to be looking at today. I'm just going to click on this add button. You see it's listed all these different work lists, all in alphabetical order, so I can go through the tabs. This is all the work lists that are available in the training environment. In Go Live, when you're accessing the system, you'll only see the work list that you're involved in. So you won't see a really long list. Because it's a really long list, I can filter and search for a name. So if I just start typing in, it already starts to filter it for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a support plan. So the commission of care forms, obviously they work side by side with the support plan. So I'm going to add a support plan and a commissioning of care form at the same time. Well, I'm going to go through the support plan first and then the commissioning of care form. You see here there's 3 tasks. Add the support plan, submit the support plan, and authorize the support plan. So I'm just going to add the form. It's giving me the option for a subtype. Now some forms have a subtype, and what that will mean is within the form you can do various different things. So it could be in this case you can see there's all these different options. So this form can be either of these. It could be multiple sometimes depending on what form you're working on. Because I don't know what I'm going to pretend I don't know what I'm going to be doing, so I can skip that at the start because it asks you again at the end. And you can see as it gets there, it's opened up the support plan in a separate window. If it hasn't done that for you, it will be because you've got pop-up blockers on. So at the top here in your address bar, you'll see there's like a little thing that looks like a calendar and it's got a little red X circle. If you click on that and click on allow pop-ups, it will allow them to pop up later for you. And if you've had to do that, you can just click on the right in here and it will open the form up for you. A really good thing about the forms in Eclipse compared to Care First is it opens up on a separate window. So what that's allowing me to do, if I need to go and get information from my case notes, I can go to a case note, open it up, copy the information, go back to my form and paste it in there and vice versa. Not necessarily just case notes, I can be doing it on various different things you need to get information from. It's quite, if you was working on the finance screens, if there was on Eclipse, you'd be able to go in, just work on both at the same time. You'd also be able to have 2 forms open for the same person or different people. So it's quite a handy feature. Now, I understand most people that are listening to this video today won't be doing support plans and the initial part of the commissioning of care forms, because the majority of you will be brokers and CSCOs. But it's handy to get a whole overview of how the finance process works and how you get to the parts that you process. And all the forms in Eclipse look very similar, so it's just handy to get more of an overview of how the forms look. And as I said, they all look very similar. They've all got these exit buttons at the top. We've got a contents page on the left, and we've got some boxes on the right, the main part of it. And as you can see, you've got this orange triangle here, which is missing data. And it's saying there's 2 mandatory fields. It's also got that down here. So I wouldn't be able to complete the form unless the mandatory questions are completed and it's telling me where they are. I can use these contents to skip around. Not a great form to show you because there's not much information underneath to skip around. And these things on the left relate to the boxes on the right. So to go through a form, you have to go through these boxes. You can see it's got an edit at the top and the bottom of the box. You can click on whichever one of these you like. It's just handy to have one at the top and one at the bottom. You can see that's now changed. Now from edit, it's got a save and next, and cancel. So if I click cancel, it just gets rid of everything I've done. If I was to go save and next, it would save this part of the form and then go into the next box. And if I was to click save, it would save this box and it'd go back to this screen where I could exit if I needed to. So the different options are there for, if save would be if you'd got to the end of the part of the form that you need to do, and then you'd send the form off to someone else. You could do that, or if you needed to save because you needed to go somewhere to get more information, or you'd finish for the day and then you could come back and continue. Save and next is obviously if you're just working through the whole form yourself today, it's just saving it as you go along and then going into edit mode on the next form. And the reason it's doing the save and next every box is because what would happen is it's enabling it so that it's saving constantly. So if it crashes, you don't lose much of the form. If it crashed and you was further down the form, which we can't see because there's no boxes yet, it would have saved all the rest before and you won't have lost that information. So quite a handy feature. What we won't see on here, because we've started at the support plan process, is we won't have seen the forms before. And what happens is in Eclipse compared to Care First, in Care First you had that view last and grab feature. In Eclipse, it carries that information across for you automatically. So you're not having to click view last and grab, it's getting the information you actually need on your behalf and filling it in for you. But because we haven't done the forms before, we're not getting that information carrying across because it's not there. So I'm just going to quickly go through here. I'm going to put the person's physical disability. Save and next. As you can see, it's gone straight into edit mode on the next one. Now, because it's got a mandatory question, if I try to save without completing it, it's saying no, you can't do that. It's telling me where they are, as we saw earlier when I tried to add a client. I'm just going to put today's date in. What is the purpose of this form? Support planning. Is the plan still needed? These blue information boxes are here to help you complete the form. It's just giving you information. I'm going to go yes. Online. Obviously, if you was a social worker, you'd know what to put in these boxes. It should be the same questions as what you're used to seeing in Care First. And it goes for funded services only. You can see here more blue information boxes telling you how to helping you complete the form. So I'm going to go home support. I'm just going to go through a basic home support budget request. Well, commission of care. Save and next. Should you need, please edit to only include outcomes to be achieved through the support plan. Client needs home support. Obviously, you potentially be putting more information in here, but because it's only a training exercise, I don't need to fully do them. Save and next. I'm going to pretend that the service is starting next Monday. I'll put that for next Monday as well. I'm not going to give it an end date. Obviously, if you're a social worker filling in this bit, you'd know what to put. So I'm just going to put something else. Be a lot more serious than get footballs. We're going to put these for £100. We'll put £150. They're going to put that they've got no contribution. Again, we've got some more blue information boxes telling you how to fill this bit in. Save and next. Contingency plan. We're going to put not applicable for this one. See if I can type. We'll put that it will have a further review by allocated worker, and we'll put that it's going to be in 2 weeks after the service started. Obviously, if you're a CSO or a broker listening to this, you wouldn't be doing this form, but you potentially may be looking at the person support plan when you're sourcing the service or trying to add the service to Care First. So it's just handy to see what the form looks like. But if you're a social worker listening, obviously you'd be doing this as well as doing the commissioning of care form at the same time. Authority. So orange boxes are more of a serious, helpful information. It says a self-funded client is one who arranges their own supports, pays the providers directly, and does not take up the offer of local authority support with this. A full cost client is one who pays the full cost of the services they receive, but whose support is arranged by the local authority, which includes regular reviews. It's not having funded nursing care, so I'm just going to leave that. Save and next. I'm going to put today's date in again. They're not already having support. It's a community one because we're keeping it basic. It's a support in the community. It's not direct payment. Does the package include? Yep, service commission. Obviously, this would be getting done, as I said, at the same time as the commission in the care form. Because we're in a training exercise, I'm going to do the support plan first and then the commission of care. I'm going to go save and next. You can see that's fully completed. There's no orange triangles on the left, which mirrors across the right. There's one thing I forgot to say. If I was in edit mode here and I tried to edit another section, it doesn't allow you to do that. It says edit in progress and it tells you what section that is. If you're unsure where that was, you could use the contents page and you can see it's got a little square with a little pen in it. That tells me I'm editing that section. I can just click on that and it will take me to that section. I'm just going to save that. We're going to exit and submit because that's happy. I'm finished with that. We're going to submit. Yes. Subtype, it's a support plan and submit. And what that will do is it will send it straight to my manager for them to look at and authorize. Earlier when we was looking at the case notes, you could see there was ones with orange circles and ticks. This has got a blue circle and a question mark, and you hover over it, it says submitted. So I'm just going to quickly pretend I'm the person's manager. Apologies again, if you're a broker or CSO, you wouldn't really be involved in this part. I'm just going to quickly show you how it works. If I go back to my desktop, click on the authorization tab. And we can see there's one here to authorize. So I could look at it. I could look at the client just to see what kind of information they're doing. I can view, reject, and authorize. If I was rejecting it, you have to put a comment in there because obviously if you're rejecting someone's work, you'd want them to know what they've done wrong. And authorize is also the same. I'm just going to put OK. Obviously, a manager would be putting something better in there, that I presume. I'm just going to authorize it. If I go back to my forms, you can see now it's got a green circle with a tick. If I hover over it, it says complete and authorized. If I go to my work list, you can see that's showing as 100% and it's triggered the review. It's got the review's date and the owner. I'm just going to go now and add the commissioning of care form. Same as how we added the support plan. This has only got one task, which is to complete the budget application form. Now, what would happen is if we was in a live system, the support plan and the commissioning of care form would have majority of the time been triggered from a form before, normally a conversation free. There is they can be added manually, but the majority of the time they would have been triggered from a conversation free. So I'm just going to open this. So as you can see, the form for the budget application is exactly the same as the form for the support plan. And that's because all the forms in Eclipse look very similar. You can see this one has got the contents on the left and the boxes on the right with so many triangles. This one's just got 4 mandatory questions. So I'm just going to go through and start completing this commission of care budget application. You have to click edit like we was in the previous form, so we've got the same options again. I'm just going to put I am the name of the worker, type of funding BCC, long term, new service. I'm just going to put it's £450 and it's going to be a total of £150 because we're going to just say we're doing a brand new home support service for £150. I'm just going to keep it basic, sound from the community. We'll go Erdington and physical disabilities and we'll go save and next. You can see that there's triggered because I've clicked save. If I click save, it would have also brought up the responsible code. It's handy if you need to find the responsible code for a service, it should be here in the budget request and it should transpire to the next forms. And then we've got the main part of the budget request. It's got exactly the same template as what is used on Care First, detailing the breakdown of how you would request a service. I mean, I'm not going to fully fill it in here, but if you're someone that would need to fill it in, you should know what to put. I'm just going to put needs home support. Obviously, there'll be a hell of a lot more in a proper live request. I'm going to put NA for joint funding. Obviously, if you was doing joint funding, there's the blue information there to help you detail what you need to put in the request. I'm going to go save for next. And now we're on the proposed service form. And as I was saying earlier, the good thing about forms in Eclipse is they are intelligent. What it will do is it will only ask you the questions that you need to be asked, depending on what line you are going down. So we can see here, there's proposed service and then scrutinizing manager. Now, if I click direct payments and daycare, and then click save, it will generate a box for direct payments and daycare. So you can see it's only asking the ones I need. So if I take them out and put it as home support, you can see it's took out the daycare and direct payments and changed it to just home support. Now, what that's enabling you to do is obviously in Care First, when people did budget requests, sometimes it gets to what's the manager has agreed, and they would be filling in the wrong box. They may have put in the direct payments in the home support, and then it would end up triggering information to the brokers that didn't need to go there, or vice versa, and the brokers wouldn't be getting the request to source the service. So if we just go back on here, we can see there's one for direct payments, one for home support, one for day ops, placement, and other services. So other services would be things like telecare. If it was an invoice for a one-off cleaning service, various just other things. But I'm just going to do a basic home support one. If you're going along and doing one yourself, you can select whichever option you want. I'm going to go save for next. And now we're saying, what is the details of the home support? I'm just going to put 2 calls a day, AM and PM. Well, I'll change that and put 9 AM and 9 PM. Obviously, if you was doing a full request, you'd be putting more details in there. You can see here, the budget holder to be able to understand what is being requested, brokers to be understand the service that is being tendered for. So obviously, it would be more like this, actually, thinking about it. 9 AM to help dress, make. If you're used to filling these in, it's no different to what you'd expect to see on Care First. 1 call each day. PM. Service type, I'm going to go home support, and client group, physical disabilities. Save and next. So if you was the social worker that got to this point, what would happen is you'd save here and reassign it to your scrutinizing manager, which would likely be your SPD or your line manager. They would go through the form and make sure they're happy with it. They would then put a comment in. And then save it and send it to their budget holder. If they wasn't happy, they'd save it, put a comment in and send it back to the social worker. But for now, we're just going to pretend everything's fine and we're just going to do every step ourselves. So we're just going to go save and next. So this is obviously where now the budget holder would have received it from the scrutinizing manager. And they're going to put, they've got an action. It looks similar to the Care First one. They'll put a comment in the top. If they wasn't happy with it, they would also, like the scrutinizing manager, save it and send it back to the social worker that had sent the request, detailing what is wrong, or potentially discuss it with them outside of Eclipse. Save and next, and budget holder. We're going to pretend I am the budget holder as well. And we're approving. It's got different types of home support, as you can see here. But we're doing quite a basic one, so we're going to go home support. We've agreed £150, long term. Support team was Erdington, PD. And as you can see here, it's giving me the option of what broker clipboard to notify. So what would happen here, similar to what we've seen earlier in Eclipse, you start typing it in, it gives you a drop-down list. So if I start typing in brokers, it gives me 3. Now, don't worry if you're a broker and you're watching this and all of your teams are not showing there, because we're only in a training system. It doesn't list all the teams, but when we're in Go Live, you would see all of yours. So we're just going to send it to the community one because that's the work we're doing. You can see it says broker clipboard. Save and next. And exit and complete. Yes. Go back to complete forward. Yes. And we can see that's got the, similar to the case notes earlier, it's got the white piece of paper with the orange circle and tick. If you hover over it, it says it's been complete. So if we go to work lists, we can see that has now triggered 2 forms. The one is the Commission of Care Budget Approval Home Support and Commission of Care Brokerage Request Home Support. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do the social work one. You can see that's gone to the social work team. And that one's gone to the broker team. So I'm just going to do the social work one. Obviously, in Go Live, it'd be a case of these would be done at the same time. The social worker and the broker would be working on theirs at the same time and communicating with each other. But because I'm just one person doing it all in a training system, I will be doing all the pieces of work. So I'm just going to show you the social work one first. And it's that one. And you can see, as I said earlier, you don't have to view last and grab. It's done that for me. It's brought the information across from the approval. And the first box is all filled in. The second box is all filled in. So I'm only having to do the last box. Has it been agreed? Start date's been agreed. Put today's date. I would be having to put who the provider is. And I've got the option to add any notes. And then I'll pick what CSO clipboard I want to send it to. Similar to how the broker one worked. And just start typing in CSO. And similar to the brokers, don't get worried if your teams are not all listed there because it's a training system. I'm just going to pick the CSO one. Save and next. And exit and complete. Yes. And complete. And that is the social worker aspect finished for the Commission of Care form. So I'm just going to look at, well, I'll just show you the work list for a second. You can see that's now generated one for the CSOs, which we'll look at in a second. I'm just going to go back and do the broker one. Now, as a broker, you've received this now instead of an activity. And it looks very similar to the one we just saw for the social worker. You can see it's already carried the information across saying what the request is for. You can see that the budget holders agreed it and how long they've agreed it for. So you should now no longer, as a broker, receive any requests that haven't got approval. They should all come through this way. So everything should be approved. You're not really having to check anything. It should have all the information on here that you need. And you're only having to do the last box. So as a broker, you'd go and source the agreement on CareMatch and communicate with the social worker. And once you've got it all confirmed and set up, you'd come in here. Has it been finalised? Provider agreed or service no longer required is your 2 options really. There's one for other, but you'd normally pick one of the 2. And you've got the options to put notes if you need to. So I'd imagine an example for a broker of the notes they may use is provider time to accept on CareMatch. The broker, you potentially know more different things you'd put in the notes. That's just an example I can think of. And you're just going to go save and next, exit and complete. Yes, and complete. Very similar to the activity, you're just saying that you've done the work, but you know, instead of doing an activity on Care First, you're doing a form / work list in Eclipse. And if we go to the work lists, we can see that both the social work one, which is there, is 100%, and the broker one is 100%, and we've got the CSO one. So I'm now going to pretend I'm the CSO. Understand this is very fiddly because I'm doing all the different teams' roles. So as a CSO, you'd open the form. And you can see it's very similar to the social worker and the broker one. It's brought through the information. It's saying what's been agreed there. It's saying it's, you can see clearly it's £150, and it's for home support and PD. The bit from the social work form is carried across. And we've just got this box at the bottom. We've got a little blue bit. It says, please do not set this form to complete until any outstanding updates to the service agreement has been dealt with. So similar to the brokers, you would receive this form instead of an activity, and you just come in and edit the last box once you've added the service to Care First or to Eclipse once the finance screens have come across, and it's just asking, has the outstanding updates to the service agreement been dealt with, and you just go yes. We haven't got a notes box like the other two options. If I go no, there's still nothing there to be put. So you'd literally only be doing it once you've added the agreement. So I'm just going to go save and next, exit and complete, and yes, and complete. And that is the end of the commissioning of care process. The one other thing I forgot to show you to do with forms, just go to, I'm already on my forms page. As I said earlier, in case notes you can attach files or documents. You can also do that in forms. So if I just go to this one, I'm just going to go upload file. Works exactly the same way as before. So just click on the file I want to. Just give it a dummy name for now. You can see there it's got a paperclip next to it with the file attached. If I go to my documents page and go on the forms, you can see that there's one attached. Back to the forms. If you was waiting to see who was working on it or when someone had done something, you can click on this view button and it gives you more details. You can see it's all been completed by John Corsa and the completed by date. I think you've also got a similar option on work lists. Oh no, you haven't. You can just see who the owner is and what percentage completed at. So if I just go back to my person's page and the person summary, we can now see that there's information on here that we didn't really have earlier. You can see there's more events. If I click on the chronology, it's just got about the support plan one, and there's nothing in finance because it hasn't come across from Care First. So we've just got that there really. And that is the end of today's training video. I hope you found it useful and thank you for listening. Goodbye.